All right, guys, here we go again. Mr. Scott with you, Chapter 3, Lesson 4, the Southern Colonies. Once again, these are for just a quick review if you need it. If you need to finish up on your lecture outlines, if you missed something, this will be an opportunity to maybe see some of those things again. These are kind of a shorter version of what we're going to do in class, but it will give you just a rough idea. If there's ever any questions, anything like that, come see me before, after, during school. Shoot me an email. I'll be more than happy to help you out with it. Now today, the Southern Colonies. Some of the things we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the motivation for the new, why'd they go there? Let's just say it. Why'd they go there? We need to figure that out. We need to figure out the reasons behind the settlement of Georgia, including the role of John Oglethorpe in Georgia as a debtor colony and a buffer colony. We're going to locate and identify the first 13 colonies. The Southern Colonies here will wrap that up for you. And also we're going to compare and contrast day-to-day life for colonial men and women. Now, we started out with Jamestown, and we went to the New England colonies, Jamestown being the first successful English colony. Then we go to New England. We talked about those. We talked about the middle colonies. Now we're at the South. Now, when you say the South, you don't always think of these certain states, these certain areas, but when it came to the colonial times, these were the Southern colonies. You had Georgia, you had South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, and Maryland. We're going to talk here a little bit about Georgia being a buffer colony because the Spanish have settled down here in Florida. They're going to use Georgia as kind of a zone to keep them out of the rest of the area. We'll talk about the geography and how that plays an influence on things. Looking at the map, it's easy to see the difference. If you can remember the way the New England map looked, here in the South there's cattle. There's not as much fishing as there was up north. You're going to have grain. You have indigo in the South. Now, indigo, for those of you that don't know, is actually used as a dye for clothing. Very popular item, very expensive item that was being grown here in the colonies. You're going to see a little bit of iron, lumber. Rice is something else that's being grown here that's nowhere else in the colonies. Rum and tobacco, of course, tobacco. Now, we talked about tobacco starting off in Jamestown, and due to the geography of the South, the rich soil, the temperature, the extended growing season, the rains, tobacco does very well. And as the video that we watched earlier said, the world was addicted to it. This is where they grew it. Now, we look at these regions, you see one specific area. Of course, right here is your southern colonies, your middle colonies, your New England colonies. Right here's the back country, right along the Appalachian Mountains, right through here. Anything on the other side of it was considered back country, and there's a slow push. Actually, not very slow at all. At first it was slow, but now there becomes a really big push to settle this back country area right here. Now, right here is just a picture of the typical log cabin that you'd see in the back country area. Another little rendition of it. Here's a replica of the cabins that they might have had at the time. But more importantly, let's get back to it. How does the geography influence the way people live? Why does it matter? Well, it matters because the South was perfect for the agricultural portion of the colonies. The warm climate, the long growing season, the rich soil. It spurred the growth of large-scale agriculture in the South. And as we see and as we move forward, just keep in mind that the South is going to stay agricultural. It's going to stay based upon farming, whereas the middle colonies in the north will prosper a little bit more, a little bit ahead of the game when it comes to technology. But we'll get there when that time comes. Now, the guiding question, what problems face Maryland and Virginia? Keep in mind, we're just going to blow through this right here as a review. We're going to speed through it. But looking at it, you see the early English colonies in the Virginia area. Of course, Jamestown being the first successful one right here. The lost colony of Roanoke, the first unsuccessful attempt that we had. Some people were forced to go to work in colonies, such as English criminals and prisoners of war, African slaves, and indentured servants. Now, slaves, ever-growing thing in the colonies of the South. You notice the chart right here showing slavery. Enslaved people in the colonies from 1650 to 1710. You'll see the South just takes a sharp increase to it. The North does increase, but nowhere near at the rate of the South. and that's for a few reasons. The main reason is agriculture. They needed hands, they needed workers in the fields to come and plant. It's not like today where a single farmer can run this massive farm. They didn't have the equipment by any stretch of the imagination. Hand tools. That was the biggest thing they had. They needed people. People had to bust the ground. People had to keep the weeds out. People had to plant. It was a big, tough job. And as the South was so good at growing things, the need became larger, so the need for slaves became larger. Also, we're going to talk about the indentured servants. The indentured servant system worked this way. You wanted to get away from Europe. You wanted to get away from England. You wanted your ticket to come to the New World, but you couldn't afford it. So what happens? Well, me as a plantation owner, a large farm owner, I'll say, I'll buy your ticket. Gladly will I buy your ticket. The only thing is you have to come here and work for me for 7 years. Or more in some instances, maybe less in others. But we'll just say for 7 years. You have to come and work for me. Now after that 7 years, I'll give you a little bit of money, I'll give you a piece of land, and you can do your own thing. But I get you for 7 years. Many people took this opportunity. The sad fact was is that a lot of people didn't make it that first 7 years to get their reward at the end. Now, just an artist's rendering of the tobacco plantation in the southern colonies. You see the fields of tobacco, you see the slaves working it, you see the colonists nicely dressed, not working very hard. Now, establishing Maryland. Maryland arose from the dream of Sir George Calvert, Lord Baltimore, heard that one, who wanted a safe place for his fellow Catholics who were being persecuted in England. We talked about the English persecution of religion. You had the Church of England, and that was it. Many people in England had been Catholics for generation upon generation upon generation. And they were facing stiff and strict persecution for being a Catholic in England. So what do? They want to come to America. They want a new life. Sir George Calvert makes that happen. He brings a group with him. They form Maryland. The problem is, Calvert's son gives away large estates to English aristocrats, and Protestant settlers start coming in. And they started outnumbering the Catholics, and in 1692, the Anglican Church became the official church of Maryland. Virginia. As Virginia grew, settlers moved inland to open up the backcountry. I showed you the map earlier, and there's so many people coming, and so many people claiming land and wanting more and more, they start pushing that backcountry territory, the boundaries of Native American territory. So they start settling within Native American territory, and as a result of this, they start having raids. Now, Nathaniel Bacon, he opposed the colonial government's pledge to stay out of Native American territory. We weren't always trying to push and take and take and take and take. At some points, we made peace and said, hey, here's yours, here's ours, we're not crossing this line. Nathaniel Bacon and others, other settlers, other colonists, wanted more. So they banded together. He started leading attacks on Native Americans, the Native American villages, and had successful raids. Problem is, with Mr. Bacon, he gets a mysterious illness and dies. And from that point, the rebellion ends. Just a rendition of artist's rendering of Mr. Bacon and a rendering of some of his raids. Settling the Carolinas and Georgia, what factors contributed to the growth of the Carolinas? Let's talk about it. Now, 1663, King Charles II created a proprietary colony called Carolina. It was one big area. It hadn't been split at this point. John Locke wrote a constitution for the colony that covered topics such as land divisions and social rankings. Now, John Locke is a name you're going to hear a lot, especially during the Revolution and the founding of our nation. Not that he was alive then or had any part in it, but the fact of his writings. Many people look back to his writings to gain inspiration for the push for American freedom and the birth of our country. However, in 1729, Carolina becomes two royal colonies, North Carolina and South Carolina. Now, Georgia, last but not least, was founded by James Oglethorpe, who received a charter for a colony where debtors and poor people could make a fresh start. This was your opportunity. If you were in over your head in debt in England, this was your opportunity to have a place to come, start over. Now, it served another purpose on top of being a debtor's colony. It served as a buffer for Spain. Now, the map I showed you earlier, Georgia, of course, as we all know, Georgia's down south, Florida's right under it. Florida was being settled by Spain. Now, Britain, or the English and the Spanish, had always been at it. Always. There's conflict after conflict after conflict. So Georgia was kind of what was considered to be a buffer area to keep them from colonizing any more land and getting anywhere closer to the English colonies. Now guys, that's just a quick overview. If you have any questions, please feel free to come by, email me, whatever you need to do. I'll be more than happy to help you. Thanks for watching. Hope it helps. Have a great day.